Hello and thanks for joining me for today's video. Today we're going to be painting this little landscape. This is a photo reference I've taken myself. It's linked down below if you want to follow along, and this is the painting we're going to create today. We're also just using a minimal palette of colours. Today I've used Quinacridone Red, French Ultramarine Blue, Hansa Yellow Deep and Lamp Black, and some white gouache to fix a mistake just in here. The other things I used today was a pencil just for sketching, a T-square ruler I used two paintbrushes, a number 6 round, this is a synthetic, it's got a nice spring to it, it's like quite a firm brush, and then I've got a softer brush here which is a number 4 round. This is a synthetic sable. I've got my paint bucket with 2 wells, one for dirty, one for clean. You could use jars if you don't have one of those, and a heat tool for drying. If you don't have a heat tool, you can use a hairdryer or air dry. And I've also used some paper towel masking tape to tape down my picture, and a little just cardboard to tape my painting to. So let's get started. Okay, so I'm going to start by drawing a little horizon line, not quite halfway. And I'm just going to sketch in very loosely some of the shapes that I want in this painting. I'm just trying to mirror this because the water is reflecting a little scenery here. This isn't exactly perfect, but that's okay. Some of this is going to get covered up with some trees. There's lots of rocks in this water here. And some of these are casting reflections as well. Not all of these are, should I say. So the other thing that's in my picture here is some little birds. So I'm not going to draw all of them in, just ones that I want here. The nice thing about drawing things in silhouette is we just really have to get the shape, so we're not worrying about details. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at that to start with, and we'll get to the painting. I'm going to use, this is a number 4 synthetic sable paintbrush. This is just a cheap paintbrush I got from a shop called Riot Art and Craft in Australia. It's one of my favourite brushes, even though it's only not a very expensive one. It's lovely. Okay, so first off I'm going to mix a purple colour, and I'm going to use Quinacridone Red. And I've got French Ultramarine Blue. So what I'm doing here is I'm mixing, just adding some blue to the palette and just gradually adding it to my red so I get the tone that I want. That's a good way to not end up mixing up far too much paint, more than you really want. Okay, and now I'm just going to basically water that down and start in with my sky up here. And I'm doing this wet onto dry paper here. I'm just using some clean water just to blend out this part in the middle here, because I actually want that bit to be a little bit lighter but still have some paint on the paper there. Yep. With the darker mix of the purple, I'm going to add in some cloud shapes. The reason I like this brush is because even though it's a round brush, it doesn't come to a really fine point, so I feel like I can get softer blending with this one. Just mixing some more of that colour because I've pretty much run out there now. Just add in some more of these darker clouds. And where the paper was already damp, the colour is bleeding out a little bit and we're getting this really soft blend there. So the next thing I'm going to do is mix up an orange mix. So we have these purple colours, but then it comes down into orange. So for that I'm going to use my warm yellow. So this is a Hansa Yellow Deep. You could use Indian yellow if you have that, or a cadmium yellow deep. And I'm going to mix in some of my red. I'm going to stick to using the 3 colours and then the black. So if I wanted a warmer orange, I could mix in a pyrrole red, but I'm going to stick with the quinacridone. I'm going to mix in some of this orange into the sky. So with a round brush, and this is why these are so versatile for watercolours, is that I can use the very tip of the brush to get some finer lines, or I can push the brush down like this and more towards the belly of the brush, and then I get nice bold paint strokes. So I can get a lot of shape variation, and as this is the synthetic sable, I can get these really nice blends. So I'm going to add a little bit more of the red into that mix. There's quite a bit of water in that. Adding a little bit more red. I'm going to blend it here so we can have a bit better transition between the purple and the orange. I'm not too worried if it's blending in with my orange a bit here as well. We just get more colours in our sky. This is actually almost pure red now, just mixed down with water. Just realising how washed out that's looking. Might try and adjust my light a little bit. There we go. Okay. So I'm going to go back in with some of my yellow and my red mix. And I do want to leave some white just here So while I've still got these colours in my palette, even though I'm going to go over this sky a little bit more, I'm going to go into the water now because we want to reflect the colours that are in the sky into the water. So with our orange mix, I'm going to go up into this part here. Don't worry if you go over your lines a little bit because this is all black silhouette, so the black will cover that. And I'm trying to be careful to leave some white just here. I'm not worried about going over my rocks on my birds either, again because they're also in black silhouette, so I forgot to sketch in this line here because that's all going to be black as well. Add in a little bit more of my yellow here, particularly around that white bit that we have. What I'm going to do for the rest of the water is I'm actually just going to add in a little bit of water, clean water, just to cover my painting here, so we get nicer blends with a wet into wet. I probably should have done that for the entire water, but here we are. Sometimes when you paint, you just learn as you go along. Okay, add a bit more of that red into here. This will also cause it to lighten the colour quite a bit because of that water that's on the page. I'm going to mix up more of our purple colour. So we're using our Quinacridone Red and French Ultramarine Blue. And this is quite a bit darker, but it will lighten down quite a bit. Basically just blocking this in for now, and I'm going to lift out a couple of little cloud shapes within that water. So I'm just going to use up a tiny little bit of paper towel here. And while it's still wet, I'm just going to dab at the paint. There's still quite a bit of water and paint on this paper here, so it's kind of filling back in. So I'm just going to keep dabbing at it until I'm happy with the shapes that I'm getting, even up in the orange here. Now the other thing is I got some of those cauliflower ruffles. I'm going to dab some of those away as well. I'm just using some clean water, going over this area. See if I can take out any of that. Too dry already. This is only the second time I've used this paper as well. I feel like on my arches I would have had a lot more time to try and fix this. Some of the issues I've been having. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just going to give this a quick dry and we'll go back in and do a few more layers. Okay, now that's dry. Going to switch to this number 6 round brush. This one is another synthetic and it's a lot more firm. I'm using this one because I want a little bit of control now, because I'm going to go in and add some of these small cloud details up here. So I'm going to go back for my Ultramarine Quinacridone Red mix of purple and just start adding in these little cloud shapes. In my last video I talked about the cauliflower ruffle shapes that can sometimes appear in your paintings. In a sky these aren't terrible because we can use those shapes to define or make some more cloud shapes. So I'm going to do that here where I've got some of that going on. I'm going to kind of mix out, switch between these brushes. Where I want a softer blend, I'm going to use the first brush I was using. I can blend out some of that colour. In a sky you don't really want harsh lines unless that's something a look that you're going for. I'm going to use some of our orange mix, so our Quinacridone Red and Hansa Yellow Deep. Using a little bit more of the red. So within the sky here, we do have these very bright highlights within the sky. I haven't allowed a great deal of space to put those in, but I'm going to add a few little bits. So I want to use the white of my paper here a little bit. Oh, that's the wrong yellow. I'm going to use some straight yellow. Just a really tiny amount. There's a really strong colour. And I'm just going to scribbling in some little yellow dots there. Going over my established colours there as well. Kind of like glazing those colours over the previously dried shades. Just wanted to add a little bit more of those orange warm tones to the bottom of the horizon there. Okay, now I'm going to come back up into here and add a bit more of that purple. Sorry, the battery just went. So I'm going to switch back to the softer brush and my purple mix. And I'm going to add in some kind of like negative painting up here, where I'm going to use the lighter purple colours that we've already got in the sky, and it's kind of painting around it to add these lighter clouds in. Just be careful when you're blending out with water. So I lay down the paint and then I clean off my brush, and with clean water I blend out the paint. I take off a lot of the excess water by dabbing it onto my paper towel so that the paintbrush is just damp. So the other thing I'm going to do is add a few more little purple clouds in this orange here. Now I'm going back to my yellow mix and basically glazing it over some of this orange here. There is a little bit of opacity to this yellow. And it's very pigmented, so it has a good chance of being able to show up a little bit over these other colours. I especially want that yellow around the brightest part of our sky here. I'm even going to add some up in the purple. I'm just trying to be careful not to disturb the paper too much, the surface of the paper. I don't want to disturb the paint underneath. And with my clean damp brush, just dabbing at that yellow to blend it out just a little bit. Okay. Now I'm going to come back down into the water now, and in the water I notice a little bit more in the way of red tones, so I want to, or orangey kind of, so I want to add some of those in. And I'm kind of doing these side to side motions to add a bit of that texture in the water, like the water ripples. Last week in the video I did, I used a flat brush for that, like this here, and used the flat edge of the brush and did those kind of motions as well. So if you have a flat brush, you could do that. The thing that I like about this Quinacridone Red is that when it's watered down, you can get these really beautiful pink tones with it. But it still has good light fast rating, so I don't have to worry about this fading. Alright, so I'm going to use my purple. I'm actually going to leave some of this smooth sort of blends that I have in here and just add in a couple of little purple lines of water, and add in, mix up a bit more of my purple colour. We've got some darker shades in the water down here. Excuse me. Kind of using a little bit of texture within the paper too. Kind of using the side of the brush, and we're getting these sort of dry brush on the paper, so it kind of just puts down tiny little bits of paint in this random fashion, so it can help give the look of little ripples in the water. I'm going to use a little bit more of the blue. More on its own, just to add a little bit more sort of blue shades into my purple here. Just being careful to make sure I don't have any really strong wet edges, because we're going to get more of those cauliflower blooms, which I don't want. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to dry this again, and I'm going to move on to adding some of our silhouette shapes in. That will also help me establish if I need to do any more to the sky and the water before we finish the painting. Okay, so now that we've done that, I'm going to switch back to my number 6 round, and again, because I want a bit more control here, and I'm going to use lamp black. If you don't want to use black, you could mix your own, but I want the contrast in my painting here today, so I'm going to use black. So first off, I'm going to draw in our little land in the background here, and I'm going to draw these little scribbly sort of lines with the tip of my brush up here, and I'm holding my brush closer towards the top because I want a little bit more control. And the reason I'm doing that is because I want it to look like lots of little trees in the background. And I'm going to fill in some of this before it starts to dry on me, because I want this to be kind of sort of one big solid block of colour. I don't really want to have lines or parts where it looks like it's dried and I've got other layers of paint shining through. I want this to be more solid. And I'm using quite a bit of paint here. It's more paint than water. Again, because I really do want this nice bold contrast. It's just going to make the painting look more effective. So again, just continuing with that sort of dotting, dabbing motion to create these trees and foliage in the background. I'm kind of drawing along my nice straight line here, but I'm not worrying myself too much about it, keeping it perfectly straight because of this reflection. But there are some parts that I want to leave a little gap because there's some little reflections, and I want to try and add those in if I can. So I kind of just wanted to block that part in, and then we'll have a look at adding the reflection in the water. Okay. So the other thing I'm going to do just before I go and add that in, I'm going to use some clean water and my soft brush here, and I'm just going to go over my water line of colour. I'm not scrubbing at it, I'm just adding some water. Okay, and now I'm going to go in with my black. Okay. So I'm leaving a little gap there. And I don't want too much water on my brush, so I'm just going to add a bit more paint. I'm kind of trying to work a little bit quickly because I want to take advantage of adding that water. That clean water that we added over our colour that's already in the water there, because it's bleeding a little bit into, the black is bleeding a little bit into that colour, so we get this kind of reflection look. So what I've just realised that I've done is I've added black in where I didn't want to. So I'm going to try and lift that out quickly before it dries. So I was rushing, so I've not been paying attention properly. And now I certainly have black where I do not want it. And it doesn't look like I'm able to lift all of that out. So I will definitely be using my gouache today to fix that. So I'm just going to move on, I'm going to keep going, not worry myself about that. Okay, so I definitely don't have that bleed going on anymore. It's dried up a little bit too much, so just with my clean brush, soft brush, I'm going to add a bit more water in there and let it do its thing. You of course don't need to do that. If you don't feel comfortable in doing that, you want to just paint it in, by all means, please do that. That's actually the first time I've really done something like that, and I just wanted to try it out, see if it worked. I try and look at every painting like a learning opportunity. I feel like I always learn something. So I'm trying not to go too far down there because I do want to keep some of my whites, even though I'm going to need to paint in some of that again. Okay, and I'm just going to block in this part here. For these parts I really could have used a bigger brush. So if you have a bigger flat brush, bigger round brush, you can still get a nice fine point, but use the belly of the brush to cover larger areas. So by all means, use a larger brush if you have one. Alright, I have no idea what I did here, but I've left a big white gap. So I'm going to paint in my rocks and my little birds while I can still see them. And then I'm going to come back in, I'm going to dry it and come back in and add a bit more to my sky and my water. In the reference photo there are quite a few more birds and more rocks, I think. So again, you can paint them as you see it in the photo, or you can just use it as a reference. and make changes as you see fit. The great thing about round brushes again is that they've got that nice fine point. Kind of struggling to see where I put in my little rocks. The nice thing about this picture in particular for your sketch lines is it doesn't matter if you draw them dark, because we're literally painting over it with black. So you know, you can paint over all of your sketch lines. In some paintings, especially with watercolour, you really don't want to have your lines showing through too much, or you might like that look. I actually quite like that look myself, but sometimes you don't really want those lines. But in this painting, those lines really do disappear. So again, the nice thing about this as well is that even though there's some that I didn't sketch in before, I can just go ahead and add them. So you can obviously do that too. The other thing you can do, even in the photo, the reflections are pretty much as black as the rocks itself, but you can leave some of the water peeking through, those colours that you've already painted in, peeking through, so you can kind of have this real, more sort of reflection kind of look. I feel like I want a bigger rock down here. There isn't one in the reference, but I'm just going to add it in. Oh, actually there is one in the reference. What am I talking about? Thought it was part of the water for a second. So what you could do is you could just, you could still actually paint in, you don't have to leave the lines, but you could just add a little bit more water to it so it dilutes the colour for your reflection. Just adding a little bit more black up the top here. Where I feel like it was a little bit too watered down. I'm noticing there's actually quite a bit of black up here as well that I want to add in. And these could be other little rocks along the shoreline. Don't have to colour it in its entirety, but just add in a few more shapes. The other thing I do need to be adding in is some trees, but before I do that I'm going to dry this and add in a bit more paint into my water there, and then we'll see where we're at. Right, now that that's all dry, I'm going to go back in with my soft brush and mix up a bit more of my purple. If you don't feel confident to mix your colours yet and you have a purple on your palette, by all means use that one. And same with your orange, you could do that as well. I'm just going to go in and add a little bit more purple down here. I'm trying not to disturb the black, even though it's dry. If you scrub at it, it could lift some of that colour away or muddy up your other colours. And I'm going to add in some more of my orange mix in here. So again, trying not to disrupt that black. Please learn from my mistakes and paint the whole water in first. I should have had another cup of tea. Or a coffee. Paper towel is such a handy thing to have when you're painting, just to dab away any excess paint. If you've put it down in the wrong place, you want to lift some of that paint up, you can. I'm just deciding whether I want to add in any more paint in this part. I actually kind of like this nice soft colour that we've got going on, so I think I might leave it, but I will add a little bit more of our yellow mix up into here, yellowy orangey kind of colours. And at this point it doesn't even matter if I go over all of my white, because I already need to fix where I've added in that black, so I can always paint over with the white. And I actually am going to add in some of my just straight yellow over that, those white gaps that I left up here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to quickly dry this one more time, and now I'm going to go back in with the black and add in our trees and a few more details, and this painting is almost done. Okay, so I'm going back to our number 6 round and back to our black. Again, more paint than water because we want this nice and bold. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with this tree, the first tree in here. Actually seems like it's growing from this rock even. So now what I could do is hold the brush further back, but I'm a little bit nervous about doing that. So what I'm doing is just using really light pressure to draw in my little branches. If you're a little bit nervous about this as well, what you could do is even use a pen. You could use like something like this, like a Staedtler pigment liner. It has nice fine tips. You can buy these in packs that have like 4 different liner sizes, so you could try that. You could always draw them in with a pencil first as well. I really want these lines to be nice and fine, so I'm just trying to just with the lightest pressure possible add in these little branches here. It's mainly for this one because the other ones have a lot more in the way of leaves on them, so I'm just adding in our little reflection down here. And I'm not worrying too much about getting it perfect. Now, guys, in retrospect, I probably shouldn't have started with that tree because I'm going to have to dry it again now because I don't want to smudge that tree. So probably should have started the other way, but I kind of wanted to put in that tree so I know sort of how far to go. So I'm just going to pause it and quickly dry that. Okay. Oh, I really should have had that coffee. Dear, oh dear, oh dear. Okay. So what I'm going to do is, before I go in and add any of my leaf shapes, I'm just going to draw in the branches of these trees so I sort of know how many to do. And I can add some, sort of let the brush do some of the work in creating variations in the lines, so you can sort of skip or add a bit more pressure and then lift up, and so we get some rough sort of shapes, creates a more organic look. Okay, so I'm going to leave it at those, and now I'm just going to kind of scribble in some branchy and then branchy shapes, and then some leaves as well. Could actually have one coming off the side here. I'm actually going to add another one just in here. You could make these trees as detailed or as simple as you like. Really depends on the look that you're going for. I'm trying to keep these real-time tutorials simple and quick as possible. Sometimes I mean, this is only the third one so far, but you know, the first one was 40 minutes and then the second one was an hour and a half. So it's just a bit of a balancing act for me, but I'm sticking to a sort of smaller painting so that, you know, we're not getting too overwhelmed, and hopefully it's something that we can tackle, you know, in around the hour mark, you know, hour and a half or something like that. I'm not sure how fond YouTube is of these sort of longer videos, but I think sometimes speed paintings are still good and I still like doing those. But sometimes it's nice to be able to sort of go along slowly and, you know, at the same pace and paint along. So I'm going to add in some of the reflections now. Doesn't have to be sort of mirror perfect, just so you've got the idea. It's all about suggestion. That's probably why I didn't concern myself with painting this earlier, because a lot of it was getting covered up. But there still needs to be some colour there, so. Okay, so the other thing I want to add in is a few little details down here. There seems to be some, it's kind of like the shoreline, a little bit of rocks down here. Okay, so I think I'm going to dry that off and just fix up this white bit. Okay, so I've got a little bit of white gouache here. And I'm going to use this as straight as I can. I really don't want too much in the way of water in this mix, because it'll water it down a bit too much. So basically just trying to cover that black from earlier. We got in the wrong place. And while we've got that gouache out, I'm going to add a little bit more of that white into the sky here. Just a little bit. And I want to, with sort of a little bit watered down, I want to go in and add a few little white clouds up here. Now this looks pretty white going on, but it is watered down a bit, so once it dries, that purple colour should still sort of peek through a little bit. And I don't want to go overboard here, just add a few little cloud-like details. You could totally skip this if you wanted to, you don't need to do it. The other thing we can do, and this is varying away from the photo reference again, is we could add a few little birds flying in the sky if you wanted to. I think I will just add just a few. So I'm going to use my black mix. You could use your pen if that's what you're using. Again. I'm just going to add those two tiny little birdies, and I'm not going to worry about the reflections of that in the water because they're quite high up and they'd probably be casting shadow into this black part here, so you can probably barely even see that on the on the video. I don't know if I can get that to focus. Yeah. Tiny little birdies. Okay, so I'm just going to give this one last dry and then we'll remove the tape. Okay, so I'm calling this painting done now, so I'm just going to remove the masking tape. Don't forget, if you're having some trouble lifting that masking tape, you can use your hairdryer or your heat tool to loosen some of the adhesive. Just helps you remove it a bit easier, hopefully less damage to the paper. Spend all that time when you're lovely painting, you don't really want to ruin it with your masking tape. Okay, so that's all done. I want to thank you very much for watching, especially if you made it all the way through this video. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you want to see more content from me. A comment always helps as well, so I know what kind of content to create for this channel. I want it to be useful for you guys that are watching, and ultimately at the moment I'm just picking things that make me happy to paint, which is pretty much how I function anyway. But yeah, ultimately I want it to be helpful for anyone watching these videos. So if you have any suggestions, please leave them down in the comments below. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer. And have a lovely day. Enjoy your painting. Bye.